Hey guys, so today we are going to do a little bit of practice finding the greatest common factor of three different monomials. And so hopefully you watched the previous video where I kind of showed you the steps of doing two monomials. So now I'd like you to go ahead and try the first step. What I'd love for you to do is pause the video, and the very first step is to take each of these monomials and completely factor them. So I'm hoping you're going to pause it now, completely factor each of those, and then restart the video to see if you did that part right. That's what I want you to do for each of these problems, is pause it in between each step, try it yourself, and then watch it along with me to see if you did it correctly. So the first one I'm going to factor is the 50b squared a squared, and that 50 can be factored into 2 times 25. The 2 is prime, so I know that I can't factor that one anymore. And then 25 can be factored into 5 times 5. So now I have 3 prime numbers. So the prime factorization, I've completely factored 50. That's 2 times 5 times 5. Then b to the second power, the factored version, is going to be b times b. And finally, the factored version of a to the second is going to be a times a, because it's obviously multiplying two a's by itself. So I fully factored the first trinomial. I'm sorry, that's not a trinomial. That's a monomial. Okay, so now I'm going to fully factor the next one, so 30b a squared. So I can factor that 30 into 2 times 15. The 2 is prime, so I know that I factored that one as much as I possibly can. And the 15 can be factored into 3 times 5. So the prime factorization for 30 is 2 times 3 times 5. And then the b by itself is simply going to be a b, of course, because there's just one. And then the factored version of a squared is a times a. So the fully factored version of the second one is there. And last but not least, I'm going to fully factor the third monomial. So first of all, I've got to factor that 40. I can do that by doing 2 times 20. The 2 is prime, so I know that's factored. 20 can be factored in a couple different ways. I'm going to do 4 times 5. That 5 is prime, so I know I can't factor that anymore. And then to factor the 4, I'm going to do 2 times 2. So now I've got all prime numbers. So that 40 fully factored was 2 times 2 times 2 times 5. I've got a b, which obviously there's no way to factor just a b. And then a squared factored is a times a. So the first step is now complete. We have fully factored it. And secondly, I'm going to find out what they have in common, because remember, we're trying to find the common factors, hence the c. So we've got a 2 in all three fully factored forms. We've got a 5 in all factored forms. We've got a b, and we've got 2 a's. So the fully factored, so the greatest common factor, we're going to pull all those pieces they have in common. 2 times 5 times b times a times a. We're going to multiply it all together. 2 times 5 is going to give us 10. We have 1b, and then a times a is a squared. So the greatest common factor of those three trinomials, why do I keep calling them trinomials? Those three monomials is 10ba squared, or sometimes we typically write it in alphabetical order, 10a squared b. Either way, it doesn't really matter. Either answer is the same, but the 10 does need to go in the front because that's obviously the coefficient. Okay, so let's do another one of these together. So first I want you to do the first step and completely factor. I'm going to assume, hopefully you listen to me, you follow the directions, and you are now going to, you fully factored them and you're just checking yourself after pausing the video. So I'm going to first fully factor the 22. So that'll be 2 times 11. 2 and 11 are both prime numbers, so that's as factored as it's going to get. And of course, the b is just kind of, there's only one b. So the fully factored version of that first monomial is 2, 11, and b. If I fully factor the next one, I get something pretty similar, right? Once again, I'm going to factor the 22 into 2 times 11. This is just a singular a singular b. So that's the fully factored form. 2 times 11 times a times b. And last but not least, the fully factored version of the third one. To get 33 fully factored, that'll be 3 times 11. Those are both prime numbers. So that's all I can do for that. Excuse me. And b to the second power is b times b. So now let's look and see what they have in common. So they all have an 11. And they all have a b in common, and it looks like that's it, right? So 11 times b is obviously going to be 11b. Okay, let's do one more of these, shall we? So you go ahead and try to fully factor all three of these, stop calling them trinomials, Dr. PB, monomials. Okay, so I'm going to assume you've done that. I'm going to fully factor the 14, which is just going to be 2 times 7. 2 and 7 are prime numbers, so that's as factored as it can get. M to the second power, the fully factored or pulled apart version, is going to be m times m. Man, those are really ugly m's. Let's see here. Eek. There we go. Once again, 14 fully factored is just going to be 2 times 7. N to the second means we would have 2 n's. M to the second means we would have 2 m's in the fully factored form. And 28 fully factored form would be, let's see, I'm going to start with 4 times 7. That 7 is prime. Then I can factor that 4 into 2 times 2. So the fully factored form is going to be 2 times 2 times 7. And of course, m to the fourth means that I would have 4 m's. So what do we have in common? We have a 2 in each case. We have a 7 in each case. And we've got at least 2 m's in each case. So that'll be 2 times 7 times m times m. So the greatest common factor is 14, m to the second.